Hey, it's James. If you're new here, we specialise in strength and conditioning for youth footballers who are aiming to play at an elite level. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how I help youth footballers increase their speed and become faster players on the pitch. So commonly when I speak to parents of youth footballers and they're looking for help with their son or daughter and their speed, they'll say one of two things: either they've done nothing in relation to the training to that because they're not sure where to start, or they are trying a few things and they're not seeing much progress, or they are seeing some progress but not to the extent that they want. If they are trying something, it's often that they're going out and they're doing some sprints, and maybe also that they're doing some plyometrics, so some plyometric exercises as well. Plyometric exercises, if you're not familiar with them, are essentially exercises where we're rebounding quickly off the ground. A lot of them are more jumping based, and there's a short ground contact time, so there's a short amount of time where your foot is actually in contact with the ground before jumping off again or moving off. So for example, sprinting, each stride, that would be an example of a plyometric, because there's a really short amount of ground contact time with the foot contacting the ground before obviously you're moving off in another direction. So that would be an example. Now, this is kind of a good starting point, but there's a number of reasons why a player might still not be progressing just from doing this. This is really a small part of a much bigger puzzle which goes into increasing speed, and it also requires some context to decide whether it's relevant or appropriate or not. Okay, so in terms of the sprinting, the parent might say, yeah, he's staying after training, after team training, and he's doing some sprinting after training. Okay, but in relation to this, it is really important to expose the body to maximal velocities each week. But a lot of it comes down to training the nervous system, and that will help the muscles to generate force at a greater speed and apply force at a greater speed as well, which is going to enable us to improve explosiveness. Okay, so we're conditioning the nervous system, and if the nervous system is already in a fatigue state, then the adaptations from that training are going to be really hindered. Okay, so after team training, the player's already going to be fatigued. If they then try to practice sprinting, the adaptations in terms of increasing sprint speed are going to be minimal in compared to if they're doing the same sprints but when they're fresh. So the nervous system is nice and fresh. That's when they're going to get the best adaptations from that sprint training. Okay. In terms of plyometrics, that is an important part of it as well. Many players don't realise that there are different types of plyometrics. So there's something called a true plyometric. Okay, and that is when the ground contact time is anywhere from 0 to 250 milliseconds. So these are the really explosive movements. And when a player is already moving and sprinting, okay, that's when the ground contact time will be in this range here. A slower plyometric would be 250 milliseconds up to 500. So slightly slower. But a lot of players aren't necessarily aware that there are different types of plyometrics. And this is just one part of strength training. So I'm going to come on to why strength training is going to play an important part as well. So in terms of increasing speed, yes, we need to be doing sprints at the right time to expose the body to those maximal velocities. So we're getting those adaptations in terms of the fast twitch muscle fibers and the nervous system adaptations as well. Plyometric exercises will also tie into that, but they are a type of strength training. So here on the board, there's a very quick example of something called the force velocity curve. It demonstrates the different types of strength training. You might have seen me cover this before in some different articles and videos. Okay, so a plyometric exercise would be down here. So the velocity of the exercise is high, but the force we're working against is normally just body weight. So the force we're working against would be quite low. But then we've got this whole other spectrum here of the strength curve. So we've got maximal strength training at the top. This is where the forces we're working against are high, and subsequently the movement speed of the exercise or movement is slow, sorry. But importantly, when we're performing these strength exercises along the curve, so the perfect combination in between is power, okay? When we're performing these exercises, the intent to always be moving at speed is really important as well. So even though the movement of the exercise might look slow because we're using a higher load, has to have the intent of wanting to move fast, because we need that explosive element in there as well as a footballer. Obviously, as a youth footballer, we wouldn't start a player with loads before they're ready. So normally training with body weight, and we'd be progressing that gradually through the complexity of the exercises and then gradually increasing the load as well. But essentially, sprinting and being fast on the pitch is not just about, you know, how fast you can sprint when you're already moving. You need to be able to accelerate from a standing start and also decelerate and also change direction and turn back on yourself as well. All these different types of speed. So when we're looking at more change in directions, let's say we're doing a lateral leap and we're landing on one foot and then pushing back off in the other direction, the ground contact time is going to be higher because we've got more load and more force to absorb. So that is going to be improved more by performing exercises which are higher up the force velocity curve. Okay, so we want to be utilizing across a full season the full force velocity curve to develop every different type of strength which will have a carryover and transfer to different aspects of a footballer's speed on the pitch. Okay, so that's that in terms of the strength and the power. Really important to be covering that full spectrum of the force velocity curve. Also, activation comes into it as well. So before we've even looked at developing strength and power further, if we can activate more of the muscle fibers within a muscle, then we can, you know, tap into greater levels of strength and power that we've already got within us. We're just not utilizing those additional muscle fibers. So if we increase the activation, then we're going to be able to produce the amount of force that we can output. And also if we can apply that at speed as well, that's going to have a carryover to our power and our explosiveness. And then also we need to look at mechanics. So if you can, you know, be really strong, be able to produce lots of force, apply it at speed, but if your mechanics are off, then that's going to be suboptimal as well. So lots of things that are going to come into this. Also stability, flexibility and mobility around the joints and the strength around the joints as well. So a few things to cover here. And I'll just do a very quick sketch of a footballer. Excuse my poor art skills. So I've given him a very high knee there. Let's go down here. Okay, there's obviously his arms here. So let's look at a footballer and how we increase the speed and what needs to come together for a footballer to increase their speed effectively. So let's look at the lower body first. So let's say that we've increased the strength and the power levels throughout the lower body through our strength-based training. That's great. What we also want to be doing is around the ankle, the knees, and around the hips, optimizing the flexibility and the mobility and the stability around these joints as well. Because if we've got lots of power and we're really explosive, but when we make contact with the ground, we kind of melt and we crumble because we lack stability, or maybe we've got a little bit of an injury that we're carrying in any of these joints here, then it's going to really affect how optimally and how much force we can put into the ground and that contact. So that's the first thing we need to think about. Also, the lower leg structure, we've got something called the stretch shortening cycle that we want to train and utilize as well. So around the ankle, the heel and the lower leg, when the foot makes contact with the ground, it's got a very big foot here. Obviously, we're going to absorb the force and try and put force into the ground when we make contact. And then all of these structures, so the tendons, all the muscles, they're all going to stretch as we make contact with the ground, and it's going to store elastic energy. So then we want to condition this to be able to store elastic energy, so as much as possible, and also release it quickly as well, so that we can continue, exploding off in any direction. So we don't want too much mobility or flexibility around the ankle, because then that ground contact time is going to be prolonged, so it's going to be longer. We're going to lose some of that elastic energy, but also we don't want to be too tight as well. So that's why it's important in terms of the mobility and flexibility. We want to be optimizing this multiple times per week, before and after every session, as part of your warm-ups and cool-downs, constantly touching on this so you keep progressing and optimizing your mobility and flexibility in each of your joints as well. Okay, in terms of the mechanics, commonly I'll have a parent who says that their child has been working with an athletics coach on their speed, which is fine, but there's a few differences between the speed for football and the speed of an athlete. Commonly an athlete would be training in a straight line, so let's say it's 100 meters they're training for. Okay, now the joint angle with the foot, when we're moving in a straight line, it's just going to be perfectly forwards, and if we can apply that optimally, then we're going to be able to apply the greatest amount of force into the ground and then push off explosively, hopefully as well. So the aim is to make contact, make that contact as short amount of time as possible, whilst putting as much force into the ground as we can within that time, So that's the aim. A footballer though needs to do it in different directions, not just in a straight line. So you need to be able to train this whole structure here to be able to be efficient with the stretch shortening cycle at different angles, because we're going to be pushing off in different directions as well, okay? At the same time as being safe in terms of how the knee is tracking over the foot and reducing injuries and increasing injury resilience as much as possible. So if we just go out and practice movement mechanics once every few weeks, that's not going to be enough, because you're not going to go out into the pitch when you're actually playing and be thinking, right, I need to be moving in an optimal way. It needs to become a subconscious thing. So what I like to do is practice good movement mechanics and optimal movement mechanics in everything that a player does multiple times per week through every session, so it becomes ingrained over time and it becomes more of a subconscious thing in terms of moving more efficiently. So that's what I like in terms of we need to be able to train the body to be optimal with the stretch shortening cycle when moving off in different directions, and at the same time as building our strength and power in the lower body and stability throughout the joints as well. Okay, now moving up the core, this is really important, your core strength and stability. Every movement is going to originate from your core, so we need your core to be powerful, strong and stable. If you're sprinting forwards and a player's got excessive sideways movement, they're losing energy side to side that could be putting in and helping them move forwards with greater speed. So we want to increase the speed and stability throughout the core. That's going to be really important. And this is also, the stronger this is and more stable, the better the transfer force throughout the lower body and up to the upper body and back as well, which is going to aid speed and explosiveness. And then we've also got to think about the upper body, which is what some players often overlook. The upper body is really important to speed as well. Okay, so if you think about it, when you're running, the arms are really involved in that. So the quicker I can move my arms, my upper body, the quicker my feet are going to be. And I need to have really strong shoulders and back muscles to get faster and more powerful with that arm drive. And it's also important as well, if you're moving at speed, someone's going to try and barge you off the ball on the pitch. So you need good upper body strength as well to be able to hold your ground whilst you're moving at speed, okay, and protect the ball. So those are a few reasons why it's really important to make sure that we're also, building that strength in the shoulders and throughout the back muscles as well. This is also good in terms of injury resilience, because some players might get nudged and they land and they might dislocate their shoulder, something like that. So again, why it's really important to have a holistic approach in terms of this, building injury resilience at the same time as unlocking greater levels of performance as well. So we've got strength, we've got the power training as well. We're increasing the activation through the strength training and also the sprint training as well. We're building stability through the training that we're going to be doing through the week. I also like to have a separate injury resilience session where we have specific exercises to address common football injuries as well, to further increase that stability throughout the joints and optimize, moving efficiently and using good movement mechanics. Okay. Alongside this, some players, when it comes to speed, they become obsessed with their top speed. Now, top speed is important in some ways, but what I like to focus on more is acceleration, because having better acceleration is going to massively increase the amount of impact you can have on a football pitch. It's more often that you're going to need to accelerate, and that's going to have a direct impact on how successful you are in any situation in comparison to top speed, which is going to happen less often, because you're not going to cover the amount of distance as often which is required to reach that top speed. Unless you're an overlapping fullback, you might, this might happen more often. But what I like to focus on instead is how quickly can we reach the top speed. So if before it takes you 30 meters to reach that top speed, let's focus on the acceleration. Can we reach that speed over 25 meters instead, and gradually work back from there? As I say, if you can become more explosive and better at accelerating and decelerating, because often the quickest players are the ones which can decelerate the quickest and change direction the quickest, because then they can buy themselves space and time. Again, that ties into the force velocity curve in terms of increasing your ability to decelerate at speed. Then working on those things, focusing on those things will trump just developing your top speed. Okay, so don't focus so much on top speed, focus more on increasing acceleration. However, top speed does play an important part in terms of stamina, So if you think about it, to give an example, let's say a player's top speed is 30 kilometers per hour. Okay, that's them working maximally. So that's an all-out sprint. If we can make their new top speed, let's say 33 kilometers an hour, that's their new maximum. All of a sudden, the 30 kilometers an hour is not their maximal. So it's not as fatiguing and intense on the body. So now every speed below the new top speed becomes a little bit easier on the body. And what that means is it's going to be slightly easier to repeat those high intensity sprints throughout a full game. So for example, it might be that the speed isn't the problem, it's actually the stamina, the ability to repeat those speeds with as little drop off in the speed of each effort throughout a game. It's the stamina that's the issue. So if we can increase the top speed, then every speed below the new top speed becomes slightly easier on the body. Just to give you like a breakdown of how that works. So as you can see, we need a really holistic approach in terms of developing speed. It's about optimizing the foot placement and conditioning the stretch shortening cycle and stability and mobility around the ankle and the flexibility of the muscles throughout the lower body as well. And injury resilience throughout each of these joints, building stability and strength in each of the joints, you know, the knees and mobility, flexibility throughout the hips as well. Everything is a chain, so if you have a problem up here, it's going to affect everything else as well. We're also going to be more focused in terms of sprinting as a footballer, less focused on having a long stride length, because athletics coaches might commonly teach that, you know, open up the stride length with each contact with the ground and you're going to cover more ground, which is going to help you to move faster. But if you've got long stride lengths in football, that means if you need to quickly stop and change direction, it's going to take you a split second longer to do that because you're not in contact with the ground. So we need slightly more aggressive steps, slightly shorter strides, and aiming to get as much force into the ground in as little amount of time that we make contact with the ground with each step. That's going to help us with, again, the acceleration. And if we can be stable throughout the body and also transfer force efficiently throughout the body as well and drive the arms, you know, with greater power and greater mechanics in terms of tucking those elbows in, and everything is driving us in the direction that we want to go in. Also tied to that will be posture as well. Then that's all going to come together to help a player increase their speed, and it's a process. You know, there's a lot to cover here, which takes time to cover, and everything combines over time. So that is essentially how I help you footballers become faster. I don't just focus on sprinting. I cover the full spectrum of the force velocity curve. Look at all different types of speed on the pitch, not just acceleration. Also, you know, top speed, change of direction, sprinting from a complete standstill and whilst also moving in different directions as well, turning back on ourselves. So all of these things. So if you'd like help with any of this for your son or daughter and implementing this, then I've added a link below this video with all the details of the program where we cover all of this with players. If that resonates with you, there's also a link on there where you can fill out an application and go through the next step.